time to you, Representative Nash, as he talks about his amendment and his life. Welcome, Representative Nash.
Hi, and thank you for being here. As Tony said, I've been serving here. I was elected in 2014 and have been on both the majority and the minority, and for the longest time there's been something that has been nagging at me to get done. And I think you've shared the video with them of the committee work. I grew up as an abused child, and for 17 years of my life, my dad abused me and hospitalized me 8 times with everything from baseball bats to axe handles to broom handles to fists. There was a time that he and my mother were separated, and I went to help him move into an apartment that was very near the red light district in Denver, and I did something that angered him. He kicked me out of the apartment with no coat, and I had to find a phone booth. That's a place where people made a phone call on a box, put coins in. And it was in the red light district, so I had to watch as a parade of people walked by doing fairly lewd and horrible things. So I finally got a hold of my pastor, who drove an hour to come and pick me up. And then by the time we got back to my family's house in the foothills of Colorado, my dad was already there. He had left and not stopped to look for his missing son. And I'm the father of 6, and if I thought for a moment that anybody was looking sideways at one of my kids that would hurt them, I would dismember them and dig a deep hole. And Tony will back that up. I probably would. And that was my life. As I progressed through getting married, and we got married, and then we didn't have kids for 6 years because I was terrified that I would become my dad. So for many, many years, I have been tormented with memories, and I sleep about 2 hours a day. And I don't like to go to sleep because when I wake up with a bad dream, it's usually the dream of being beaten. And I have absolutely vivid memories of broken bones, contusions, and about 5 years ago, I was at a family wedding with my mom. I was tasked with driving her back to the airport because we had flights at roughly the same time. And I don't know why I asked this question, but it had been nagging at me. And this place will sort of jiggle things loose that you might have otherwise wanted to stay hidden. And I said, Mom, you were a mandatory reporter as the director of nursing, weren't you? And she says, oh yes, Jimmy, I saved so many women and so many children from abusive men and horrible relationships, and I just know that I did good work and saved so many. And in that inside voice, I thought, well, if I ask this next question, I can never unask the question. So I was quiet for a couple of seconds. I said, well, Mom, why didn't you save me? And she got quiet, and as we're driving, I think a mile, maybe a little longer, and she gave what would arguably be the worst possible answer that you could give a kid. She says, well, I just figured you could take it. That was not the answer I was hoping for. So what happened was I would get beaten, I'd get broken, or I get stabbed once, drag me down, and the answer was always, oh, Jim fell. Jim plays rough. And I did. I mean, I was a kid in the 70s and 80s. We did ridiculously dumb things. We all thought we were Evel Knievel and that we would clear the Snake River Canyon and get hurt. But it was very clear to a number of teachers and coaches and other people what was going on. And I found out after the fact that my 3rd grade teacher had tried to report what was going on. And she was a brand new teacher, and she says, I loved your class, and I just had a heart for you, Jimmy Nash, and you don't get to call me that. No Jimmys. And I asked her name is Pam Gordon, like, give me details, help me understand what happened. She says, well, I took the report to the principal, who effectively made it go away. I said, well, that's a family thing. We don't want to get involved in family things. Meanwhile, I'm getting my butt kicked. There were a number of times that I remember being beaten so badly that I'm laying on the ground and I'm in the fetal position and the beatings just keep coming and coming and coming. And for the longest time, I never fought back. And I'm not a small human being. And finally, when I was 17, I decided that was it. And he took a swing at me, and I decided to defend myself that day. And that was the beginning of a time where he and I didn't talk for 2 years. But fast forward to the legislature, a number of years ago, Representative Becker Finn had a bill that would change the types of people that would be mandatory reporters, to expand it to become, so that camp counselors and other folks like that could become part of the mandatory reporting network. And I think I confounded a lot of people when I got recognized, because I'm not normally recognized for being soft and gentle. As Tony will tell you, one of my jobs is, if it was sort of in the military, I'd be that guy that kicks down the door to jumpstart conversations. And Courtney will tell you the same thing, that's a job. But you know, one of those moments where you just lose all pretense and let all that publicly facing Jim Nash things that you do just completely falls away. I shared my story briefly, and I think what happened that day was it put me on a journey to begin dealing with what I've been dealing with now. And it's hard. It's very, very hard. I have now told my children what my childhood was like, and I have told others, and I have been pushing myself to begin reconciling what does this mean to be the child of abuse. And it's not pretty. I'm not noted for my emotionalism. I'm a former national debater, so you could literally stick a knife in my ribs while I'm in a debate round, and I would go Teddy Roosevelt on you, like, well, we'll get to that later. I'll deal with that when I'm done with all. So for me to be the transparent person that you saw in both the committee video and the floor video of a couple weeks ago is incredibly hard. For me to open myself up to that level of transparency is not something that I typically choose to do on that issue. But what I know in speaking to organizations like yours and friends and just folks out of the blue is that this is far more prevalent than we know. It's far more prevalent than is being reported. It is far more prevalent than people talk about, because it's not something that you talk about at cocktail parties. You don't walk up and say, hi, I'm Jim, I was an abused kid. That never happens. But we need to begin doing more of that. And it was driven home last week when a Capitol staffer suddenly popped up on my calendar of appointments. And he came into my office, and we both started crying, because he said the bravery that you showed to share that was an impetus for him to talk about his childhood, because you don't want to talk about it. It's not something that most people would understand. And as a father of 6, I have spent my entire life doing the exact opposite of what parenting was demonstrated for me. So someone said, well, how did you learn how to parent? Like, I just did the reverse of my parents. So as we move forward through today and the future, I have spoken with Chair Moeller, and she's going to be taking this amendment on the floor today, so we don't need to go and knock down doors and yell at people. But I'm hoping to also have this come to the floor as a standalone. They may not, because they'll say, well, it's in the bill now, so it's moving along its way. But the principal area of concern should be over in the Senate, because they are not moving on this as quickly. Their principal author hasn't been given a hearing, so that's why I was able to prevail upon Chair Moeller to put it in today's bill. So as you're around the Capitol lobbying, go speak to some senators. And just a helpful tip, when you speak to House members, you can speak quickly, you can use complex words, you can use full sentences. The best thing to speak to a senator is very slowly and bring flashcards that you drew with a crayon. No, it's an important thing. And this whole journey has forced me to talk about things that are very painful. But what it has done, it has given me an opportunity to get to know my stepsisters. I was in Dallas helping my father get prepared to move into assisted living, and I had always been told that my stepsisters didn't want to speak to me, and they were told that we didn't want to speak to them, but one of them came over to help, and it turns out not only did my father beat me, and I knew he had beaten one of my sisters, my biological sisters. Turns out he beat both of my biological sisters and both of my stepsisters. And that opened my eyes to just the need to do this more. And that's why I'm pushing so hard to do something that is very un-Jim Nash-like. And if it changes the outcome for a couple of kids, because as you all read the Star Tribune story, I'm sure. That's what this is targeted at, is the situation like with my principal not being legally able to divert a mandatory report. I had coaches, I had people who were baseball coach, football coach, day camp, we all went to day camp, and they pointed out, well, this kid is getting beaten. And they're all, oh, it's a family thing, we'll make it go away. That can't happen anymore. This is a bill for the Jim Nashes and the Karens and Jennifers and Summers and Valeries, so that when a mandatory report is brought to someone's attention, they can't deflect it into oblivion.